Good evening. In this recording we are still on this Hanshu electrical storage system that is busy being installed here, and I'm still quite in two as to whether I'm actually going to place the trunking on these cables. But what I would like to share with you as user are just a couple of tips to see whether your installer has possibly taken some of the most obvious shortcuts that even a person without electrical knowledge would be able to recognize if they just know what to look for. So I thought, let me share with you a couple of these pointers. The first, and probably the most obvious one as well, check if your DC and your AC connections and cables are properly separated. Many installers tend to just place all of the cables together in one set of trunking. That's a big no. Reason being, induction. And you can go and Google that a bit if you're interested, but in a nutshell what it does, as soon as electricity moves through a cable, then a magnetic field is created. Place all of those cables together and your magnetic fields will interfere with each other. So that is why we always keep the DC and the AC cables completely separate. And you will see that I've also placed my DC connections in 1 dB or distribution box length, and my AC is also going to 1 dB. Some installers tend to put these together. That's a big no. Another common fault that I see is when we open up the DC side here, is that installers only give circuit breakers for solar panels and nothing else. Now in South Africa, what those circuit breakers do, even though they are supposedly rated for DC, they do two things. They give a false sense of safety and they ultimately give convenience. That's the only thing they are good for. If you, for whatever reason, have to trip your solar, then that's all that they're good for. Installing only the DC circuit breaker is a big no. You will see that the fuses have been installed there, and beside them the SPDs as well. You will also notice here that there's two of everything. Reason being, on my DC side, both the positive and the negative are actually fused and going through my SPDs. That is just to completely break the circuit. Whereas with AC, your current alternates, so that is why one breaker is enough. With DC, obviously your current is not going to alternate. There's going to be a continuous flow, so you have to be sure to break it. Now, if your inverter has multiple MPPTs, then, or in other words, then if there is more than one set of solar cables that is coming into your inverter here, then all you do, you count your MPPTs going to your inverter, and that gets multiplied by 2. And that should be the same number of switches or fuses thing that we end up with here, to make sure that everything is correctly broken should there be an issue for whatever reason. Then the other thing that I see many installers do, they place the distribution boards below the inverter. That's a big no. In the case of fire, it's usually not the inverter that's the culprit. It's usually not the battery that's the culprit. It usually starts here. Touch wood, it wouldn't. But if it does, and these boards are sitting below the inverter, flames will go up into your inverter, ultimately causing more damage than what it would have otherwise caused. Your inverter and battery, under normal circumstances, if it is not cheap junk, then they should have passed a couple of safety tests as well. So should a meltdown occur here, that should actually be confined. Should the fault then lie on the inverter or on the battery then. But your inverter's breather holes are usually at the bottom, and obviously flames go up. So if DB is installed here below the inverter, then that's the weak point of your inverter where the flames will actually enter and cause damage. Alternative, if you don't want to actually put them on top of your inverter, is then to place them to the side rather than below. And speaking of fire hazards, I see a lot of people installing fireballs above them. Another little false sense of security there. It is not going to stop a lithium fire. It is not going to stop a lithium fire. The only thing that's actually going to stop a lithium fire is that specially formulated gel that you spray onto the batteries. The gel does two things. First, it cools the cells down because as they burn, they actually heat up, and that releases more oxygen, and fires like oxygen. So the first thing they do, they cool the cells down, and then they actually stop the fire with a gel as well. So a normal fire extinguisher is not going to help much either. That's another false sense of security if something like that has been sold to you. We'll always go with a proper lithium fire extinguisher if you are serious about safety here. Then, luckily, with lithium, we don't have to hang our batteries on the walls anymore. Even though that is recommended, this particular raw brick wall is not going to be able to handle the weight of this 24 kilogram lithium battery here, or lithium iron phosphate then, if you will. So I've just placed it on its side just to be able to not mess up the wall in the process. So placing a lithium battery this way would thus be completely safe. Next thing I'm going to come to is programming of the inverter. Now things start to get a bit tricky, but it's always, people find it interesting. The system runs fine for 3 months and then the sports is going on, and usually equipment is blamed for that. It's usually the installer that's to blame there. The electrical side of it is only about 1/3 of what you actually see. The other two sides are sizing your system correctly and then programming your system correctly. And that's the part where many electricians fail, because they're only working on the physical electrical side and doing that math without programming the system correctly. They usually assume that if they buy the same brand inverter and the same brand battery, then the factory default settings would be the correct settings. Not always the case, and it was definitely not the case here either. When I first powered this little guy up, it was actually thinking that this is a lead acid battery, which it definitely is not. So you obviously just have to help your inverter there, and that is going to ultimately extend the life of your battery. Something else I see installers don't do, they don't use this little data communication cable between battery and inverter. Now for some systems it's not practical to use it, especially if you are using drop-in replacement batteries, if you've upgraded to lithium from gel or whatever. But in the event that your inverter supports that communication and your battery supports the communication, please do use this communication cable as well. It is ultimately going to save a lot of headache as well, and it's just going to make your system a lot less dangerous it's going to make it more foolproof in that case if these two can correctly communicate with each other. And then it is not always a matter of just plugging the two in. Some of the systems are actually smart enough to figure it out on their own. Some even have AI built in. Not always the case, so just make sure that your communication protocols and whatever is used by the inverter and the battery actually match. Otherwise, you are going to literally lose a couple of hours that you could have used the battery for into thin air. So that's another thing. Some installers just plug this cable and they automatically assume that these things are going to now communicate with each other. Just make sure that your communication protocol is actually set up correctly. Then we come to system sizing, and that is something that actually requires a video on its own. But that's another reason why systems fail, is because they are undersized for what users want them to actually use it for. General rule of thumb for load shedding, it's fine if you use a 2.4 kilowatt battery or whatever, or if you only want to use small little loads like alarm systems, Wi-Fi and the like in an off-grid setup, then it's fine. But anything more than that, at least look at a 5 to 10 kilowatt hour battery if you are looking to actually get any service from it and you actually want it to last longer than about a year, year and a half. These are just a couple of pointers for you to have a look at, some of the stuff that you as user could actually look at yourself, and I hope it could help. See you in the next video.